You didn't choose this life. This life, it chose you. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be different. You were born that way. From your earliest memories, you sensed it, the invisible line between you and everyone else. The way you moved through the world with a heart far too deep for the shallow conversations around you. The way you felt the room, not just entered it. The way you could see through people, even when they couldn't see you. You weren't loud. You weren't trying to prove anything. You simply existed differently, and that difference became your isolation. They called you sensitive, too quiet, too intense, too much. And at first, you tried to adjust. You turned down your light. You silenced your voice. You played their games, followed their scripts, walked their paths. But no matter how well you played the part, something in you kept burning, a knowing, a whisper, a voice that refused to die no matter how many times you were rejected, overlooked, or abandoned. You knew you were here for something greater, and you knew deep down it wouldn't come with applause. That's the eternal truth of being a chosen one. Your path is sacred, and sacred things often look invisible to the untrained eye. You learned the hard way. Love didn't come easy. Friendships rarely lasted. Family didn't understand you. People took from your spirit, but gave nothing in return. And somewhere along the way, you started to ask the question, why am I always the one left standing alone? Why is it me who shows up for others, but no one shows up for me? Why is it me who comforts everyone else, but cries alone at night in silence? Why is it me who loves deeply, only to be met with confusion, distance, or betrayal? And here's where the eternal truth begins, because you weren't meant to be defined by temporary relationships. You were built for eternal impact. People come and go. Feelings rise and fall. Connections fade like echoes. But your calling, it stretches beyond the limits of human validation. You weren't born for the approval of crowds. You were born to be a voice in the wilderness, crying out truth in a world built on illusions. That kind of voice doesn't come from popularity. It comes from pain, from quiet rooms, from nights of aching silence, from the long, slow unraveling of every attachment you thought you needed. This is where the chosen ones are truly forged, not in stages or spotlights, but in isolation, in silence, in that sacred loneliness where your ego dies and your soul begins to remember. You are not alone. You were never alone. You've always been held, not by people, but by purpose. And purpose, it doesn't always feel good. Purpose will empty your life before it fills it. It will strip you down to your core before it crowns you. It will take away everything you once clung to so that you finally cling to the only thing that's real, your divine essence. That's what the loneliness is for, to remove the noise, to sever the distractions, to protect you from the wrong attachments, even when it hurts like hell. Because you love hard, you give all. You don't know how to offer half of yourself. And if the wrong people had stayed, if you had been surrounded by false love and shallow loyalty, they would have drained you dry before you ever realized what you truly carried. That's the eternal wisdom of isolation. It doesn't just protect you, it preserves your power. So those relationships that ended, those family members who never saw you, those lovers who couldn't match your depth, they weren't the end of your story. They were the clearing of the path. They were proof that your soul could not be caged in low-frequency love. You were never built for superficial connections. You were built for sacred ones and sacred love. The kind that sees you, honors you, expands you. It cannot find you until you become the version of yourself that no longer needs to be found. That's the paradox. The more you embrace the loneliness, the more it begins to transmute. What once felt like abandonment begins to feel like protection. What once felt like punishment begins to feel like preparation. What once felt like death begins to feel like resurrection. Because loneliness, for the chosen one, is not a void. It is a womb, a place of becoming, a place where illusions die, and the truth of who you are is birthed. And in that becoming, you begin to remember. You remember that your voice carries thunder, that your energy can shift rooms, that your soul has ancient wisdom flowing through it, stretching back before time itself. You remember that being misunderstood doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're ahead. You remember that losing love isn't the same as losing worth. You remember that God didn't isolate you to break you. He isolated you to reveal you. So now you stand here on the other side of the ache, still tender, still healing, but stronger than ever before. Because now you don't chase love, you embody it. You don't beg for connection, you attract alignment. You don't fear being alone, you thrive in your solitude. Because you know your solitude is sacred, and slowly, people begin to notice. Not because you're trying, not because you're performing, but because your very presence has shifted. You've become a mirror, and people feel seen in your stillness. You've become a lighthouse, and lost souls begin to find their way again. But here's the key. You no longer need them to stay. You no longer attach your identity to who enters or exits your life. Because your identity is rooted in eternity. You are no longer walking this path hoping for love. You are walking it as love. And that, dear chosen one, that is the most eternal truth of all. They didn't just walk away. They were removed. It may not have felt like that when it happened. In the moment, it felt like betrayal, like rejection, like being gutted from the inside out. You wondered what you did wrong. You retraced every step, every word. You asked yourself, why did they stop loving me? Why did they turn cold overnight? Why didn't they fight for me the way I fought for them? But here's the truth. Most chosen ones only see in hindsight. They were never meant to stay. The silence was a signal. The distance was divine, and the pain, as brutal as it was a sacred message from the universe. They couldn't go where you were going. See, when you carry a spiritual assignment, when you've been marked since birth to walk a different path, not everyone can survive in your orbit. Not everyone has the capacity to hold what you carry, and most of them don't even know what they're standing in the presence of. That's what makes this so lonely. You can't explain your soul to people who haven't awakened their own. You can't describe your depth to those who only speak in surface. You can't share your truth with people who only understand masks. And so, they leave. Some walk away without a word. Some betray you and call it honesty. Some ghost you while pretending nothing happened. And yet, every exit was a divine orchestration. You don't see it right away. The pain clouds your sight. The grief presses on your chest like 1,000 pounds. But time and truth always unveils what heartbreak hides. They weren't strong enough to love someone like you, not because you're unlovable, but because love, in its purest form, is a mirror, and you, chosen one, are made of mirrors. You don't just love with affection, you love with vision. You see people not as they are, but as they could be. You speak to their potential. You pour into their wounds. You believe in their healing, even when they've given up on themselves. But here's the brutal truth. Not everyone wants to be seen that clearly. Some people need their illusions. Some people fear transformation. Some people will rather run than face the reflection you carry. And when they run, it's not because you're too much. It's because they weren't ready to meet the version of themselves your love would have awakened. So what looks like rejection is actually a rescue from cycles that would have drained you, a rescue from roles you weren't meant to play, a rescue from timelines that would have buried your purpose beneath someone else's comfort, because the chosen one doesn't live for comfort. You live for truth, and truth, it requires letting go of the fantasy, letting go of the potential you saw in them, letting go of the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd come back changed. They won't, because if they were part of your divine path, they wouldn't have left in the first place. See, real alignment doesn't abandon you when you're broken. It doesn't get scared when your light flickers. It doesn't punish you for feeling deeply. Real alignment stays. Real love sees. Real connection grows with you, not away from you. And when the divine removes someone from your life, it's not because you weren't worthy of love. It's because you are worthy of a higher kind of love. The kind that doesn't require you to shrink. The kind that doesn't confuse your purpose for a burden. The kind that doesn't leave when storms come. It holds you through them. But to receive that kind of love, you must first become it. That's why the loneliness is sacred. That's why the silence is necessary. It's not punishment, it's preparation. It's not exile, it's elevation. It's not a curse, it's a clearing, because you, dear soul, are being readied to lead, readied to rise, readied to embody the very truth you were born to speak. And truth doesn't come cheap. It costs your comfort. It costs your illusions. It costs you the relationships you once begged God to protect, but in exchange, it gives you something eternal, clarity, clarity that you are not hard to love, clarity that your depth is a gift, not a flaw, clarity that your spirit is not too much. It's simply not for everyone. And once that clarity arrives, once it finally lands in your bones, you stop chasing, you stop explaining, you stop watering down your soul just to be understood by those who don't even understand themselves. You begin to walk differently, not with arrogance, but with peace, the peace of someone who has surrendered, the peace of someone who knows that divine alignment cannot be forced, the peace of someone who has made friendship with solitude. And in that solitude, something magical happens. You meet yourself, not the version the world tried to mold, not the mask you wore to survive, but the real you, the one who was always waiting beneath the noise, the one who isn't afraid to stand alone, because he or she has learned how to stand with the divine. That's the power of the chosen one. Your strength isn't in crowds. It's in quiet rooms. It's in midnight tears. It's in those long, aching seasons of shedding what no longer fits, because every person who left, every friend who disappeared, every lover who turned cold, they were part of the burning. And from that fire, you emerged gold. So don't resent the ones who walked away. Don't curse the loneliness. Don't fight the silence. Bless it, because it's making you holy. It's refining your discernment. It's tuning your spirit to frequencies the world can't hear. And soon, you'll begin to attract differently. Not from desperation, not from longing, but from alignment. People who recognize your soul without explanation. People who mirror your depth. People who don't run from your light. They expand within it. Until then, sit with yourself. Hold your own hand. Speak to your own heart the way you once spoke to others. Because this is your season of sacred becoming. And the more you honor it, the more you'll realize the people who left were part of the plan. They never really knew you, not the real you. They knew the version you carefully presented, the polite one, the gentle one, the strong one who held everyone together, even when you were falling apart in silence. They loved your usefulness, your warmth, your ability to see into their brokenness without ever judging them. But the moment you started to become who you truly are, the moment your light grew to blinding, they stepped back, or worse, they turned on. Why? Because some people only love you when you're pretending to be smaller than you really are. And when your spiritual growth began to bloom, when you started shedding the masks and releasing the expectations, they panicked. You were no longer controllable, no longer predictable, no longer their emotional safety net. You had begun to evolve. And with that evolution came something terrifying to them. Power. Not the kind of power that dominates, but the kind that liberates. You were starting to live in your truth. You were beginning to move differently, with intention, with boundaries, with divine fire in your eyes. You stopped begging. You stopped chasing. You stopped allowing yourself to be the background character in your own story. And that terrified them, because your light, your real light, made them confront their own shadows. Your truth forced them to face the lies they've lived in for years. And so they did what most people do when they feel small in the presence of someone radiant. They walked away and made you the villain. But deep down, you knew what was happening. This wasn't rejection. This was revelation. The universe wasn't being cruel. It was stripping you down, peeling away the false layers, pruning the attachments that were never meant to last. Not because you were unworthy, but because your assignment is too sacred to be surrounded by those who don't speak the language of your soul. This is the lonely part no one talks about, the in-between season, the wilderness, where the echoes are louder than any comfort, where the old life is gone, but the new one hasn't fully arrived. It feels like floating in the dark, like waiting for something you can't name, like grieving people who are still alive, but no longer aligned. And it's here, in this sacred tension, that something powerful begins to unfold. You meet the version of yourself they never got to see, the one who doesn't need to be everything for everyone, the one who no longer accepts breadcrumbs of affection, the one who chooses solitude over noise, alignment over attention. You begin to unlearn everything the world taught you about love, worth, and connection. You realize that your value never came from how many people you pleased, but from how deeply you've stayed true to your soul, even when it cost you everything. And slowly, the ache of loneliness begins to soften, because you start to understand you're not being punished, you're being purified. Purified of false friendships, purified of shallow connections, purified of the belief that you have to earn love through suffering. And once that realization takes root, the entire world shifts. You start to see the divine choreography in every heartbreak. The friend who ghosted you, they would have distracted you from your calling. The partner who couldn't love you fully, they would have dulled your shine with their fear. The family member who always made you feel like too much, they were sent to awaken the truth that you were never meant to fit in with the ones you were sent to elevate beyond. These losses hurt, yes, but they were surgical. Removals, precise, divine, timed with the accuracy of the heavens. Because when you're a chosen one, you don't get to carry dead weight. Your soul signed a contract before you arrived in this lifetime. And that contract said, "Greater than I agree to be broken, refined, and rebuilt. I agree to walk alone for seasons. I agree to lose the ones I love, so that I may find the one I came here to become." This is the path. And no, it's not fair, it's not glamorous, and it definitely isn't easy, but it is holy, because in this sacred becoming, you are learning to stand in your truth without apology. You are learning to be whole without validation. You are learning that the one person you've been searching for was always you. You were the soulmate your soul needed. You were the healer you gave to everyone else. You were the home you tried to find in other people. And now you're remembering, you're waking up, you're stepping into your full power, not because someone finally saw your worth, but because you decided that your soul is no longer up for negotiation. You chose yourself, and that chosen one is when everything changes. Because when you fully embody who you are, when you stop bending and shrinking and people-pleasing, the world has no choice but to respond differently. Your energy becomes magnetic, your presence becomes healing, your silence becomes powerful, and slowly, new souls begin to enter. People who recognize you without needing an explanation. People who love you without trying to fix or dilute you. People who carry the same fire, the same depth, the same frequency, but they only arrive once you've stopped settling for less. That's the paradox of this path. You must be completely alone before you can truly attract your soul tribe, because it's not about numbers, it's about resonance, it's about quality. It's about walking with people who aren't afraid of your evolution. But to find them, you must first become that kind of person, which is why the loneliness is not a curse, it's a classroom. And you, brave soul, are learning how to love yourself in ways no one ever taught you. You're learning to sit with your shadows without shame, to hold your own hand in the dark, to walk through the fire with your head held high, even when no one claps for you, because you weren't built for approval. You were built for impact, and impact often begins with heartbreak. So cry if you must, grieve what you've lost, feel every wave of sorrow, rage, confusion. But don't confuse this death for defeat. It's just a transition. You're shedding the old version of yourself. The one who needed others to feel whole, the one who gave too much, too fast, to people who didn't have the capacity to receive it. You're not becoming bitter, you're becoming wise. Very soon, you'll rise, not with the same smile, not with the same circle, but with something eternal. Your truth. You thought it was just heartbreak. You thought it was just betrayal. You thought the silence from loved ones, the distance from those you cared about, was a kind of punishment. But in time, you began to realize something bigger was happening. This wasn't destruction. This was divine preservation. Because the truth is, when you're a chosen one, the separation you experience isn't random. It's sacred, strategic, surgical. You were pulled away not because you were unworthy, but because the places you were headed, the heights you were destined for, the light you were meant to carry, couldn't afford contamination. And make no mistake, not everyone who loves you is meant to go where you're going. Not everyone clapping for you is genuinely aligned with you. Some of them are secretly threatened by the very thing they pretend to admire. Some of them only stayed close because they thought you would never rise above them. And when your vibration began to shift, when your conversations stopped revolving around gossip and survival, when you started talking about healing, ascension, boundaries, and your divine assignment, they went silent, or worse, they grew cold, and you felt it, didn't you? The tension in the room, the energy shift in their tone, the strange, subtle way they stopped celebrating your growth. You tried to explain yourself. You tried to make them feel safe. You watered yourself down to keep the peace. But peace never came. Only more detachment, more confusion, more isolation. And you were left standing alone, wondering, why does everyone leave the moment I begin to become who I really am? Here's the truth that no one ever told you. Greater than your evolution threatened their comfort. You didn't change in a bad way. You changed in the most beautiful way. You became aware. You became awake. You became sensitive to your own energy, your own purpose, your own healing. But people who are committed to staying broken will always resent those who choose to be whole. You were no longer their emotional punching bag. You stopped giving without receiving. You learned how to say no without guilt. And in doing so, you shattered the old contracts, the unspoken agreements that said you would always shrink so they could feel tall. So when they left, or ghosted you, or withdrew their support, that wasn't rejection. That was your protection, because their presence in your next season would have poisoned the blessing. Let that sink in. The next chapter of your life is sacred ground. You are walking into territory where your anointing will increase, where your influence will rise, where your healing will ripple into the lives of many. And God can't allow people with secret resentment, jealousy, or unresolved bitterness to travel with you there. You see, when God elevates a chosen one, He also prunes their circle, not to hurt you, but to protect you from premature collapse. You may have thought they were ride or die, but they were really stay while you're small. They loved the version of you who dimmed her light to keep the room comfortable. They respected the you who never set boundaries. They admired you until your shine made them confront their own shadows. So yes, the separation hurt. Yes, the silence felt like betrayal. Yes, the loneliness was suffocating. But it was all part of a divine filtering process. You weren't abandoned. You were shielded from distractions, from betrayal that would have struck deeper later, from emotional vampires who would have drained you in your most vulnerable moments, because your calling is too precious to risk. You are not like the others, and the ones who are truly meant for you. Your real tribe will not flinch at your light. They won't compete with your shine. They'll clap from their soul when you win, but they can only find you once you stop looking backwards. They can only locate you once your frequency matches your divine self, not the masked version you used to be to keep others comfortable. This is why the isolation was required. In the silence, you began to hear God more clearly in the absence of validation. You discovered your own voice in the wilderness of solitude. You found the map inside you, the one that always pointed you back to your soul. And now you're no longer the same. You've cried yourself to sleep. You've begged the heavens for answers. You've screamed in the dark, asking why it had to be this hard. And the answer came not in words, but in transformation, greater than you had to be stripped of what was temporary, so you could carry what is eternal. You had to be misunderstood, so you'd stop relying on other people's approval. You had to be alone, so you'd stop thinking your worth comes from being needed. You had to be rejected, so you'd finally recognize what it feels like to be chosen by yourself. And now you're standing at the edge of something vast. You can feel it. Something's shifting. Your spirit is restless, not because you're lost, but because you're closer than ever. Closer to walking in your full anointing. Closer to meeting the people who were carved from the same divine cloth. Closer to finally understanding why everything had to happen the way it did. The pain, the losses, the confusion, the isolation. It wasn't random. It was preparation, because only someone who has bled in private can carry the kind of healing that touches lives. In public, only someone who has felt the ache of being unseen can truly see others. Only someone who has walked alone in the desert can lead others to the oasis. That's you. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not forgotten. You are being prepared. And the separation, it was never rejection. It was never abandonment. It was a sacred pause, a divine reset, a moment designed to elevate you beyond the reach of what was never meant to stay. So take a breath, chosen one. You survived what was meant to destroy you. You stayed soft in a world that tried to harden you. You kept showing up even when no one saw you. And because of that, your time is coming. And this time, you won't have to beg anyone to love you. You won't have to hide who you are. You won't have to choose between your light and your connections. Because the people coming next, they'll love the real you. They'll honor the journey. They'll match your energy, not drain it. But first, you had to be alone, so that when love finally returns, you'll know exactly what it should feel like. There comes a moment in every chosen one's journey when they finally stop asking, "Why did they leave me?" and begin whispering, "Thank you for going." It doesn't come quickly. It doesn't come without scars. And it certainly doesn't come while the wounds are still fresh. But eventually, after the grief, the nights of weeping, the aching silence, a strange kind of clarity rises from the ashes. You realize you weren't cursed. You weren't forgotten. You were simply set apart for something too big, too holy, too divinely engineered for the small rooms you once begged to be a part of, and the ones you thought you couldn't live without. They were chapters, not the whole book. Their exit made space for your evolution, you see. There's a sacred paradox to being a chosen one. The more you remember who you are, the fewer people can recognize you. The more you rise, the more you're forced to leave behind, the more light you carry, the fewer places you fit. You're not just walking through life. You're shifting realms. You're walking between dimensions. You're holding the vibration of healing in a world still addicted to harm. And that's not an easy weight to bear, especially when you're alone. Because this truth, no one wants to say out loud, greater than even chosen ones get tired. Even healers need healing. Even light bearers feel swallowed by the dark. But the world doesn't see that part. They see the strength, the wisdom, the power in your eyes, the calm in your voice. They don't see the breakdowns. Behind closed doors, the prayers soaked in tears, the whispered pleas, God, just one person, just one who gets me. You've been that strong for everyone else. And yet no one knew how heavy it was to carry yourself. It wasn't your destiny, it was your initiation, the abandonment, not your curse, but your consecration. You weren't being punished, you were being refined, you were being readied for the kind of love, purpose, and alignment that the old you wouldn't have even recognized. That's why the old relationships shattered. That's why the familiar places turned cold. That's why you had to walk alone through the darkest valleys, because the divine doesn't send you into battle untested. You were being trained in the silence, sharpened in the solitude, sanctified in the shadows, and now you are no longer who you were. You are wiser, softer, stronger, not because nothing hurt you, but because everything did, and you still kept going. You now carry a weight, an eternal one. You are not just someone who made it through. You are someone who knows what it's like to feel invisible, knows what it's like to be the outcast, knows what it's like to beg for a kind voice and get silence in return. And because of that, you are dangerous to darkness. You are healing, walking in human form. You are the evidence that loneliness isn't the end, it's the beginning of awakening, the beginning of true alignment, the beginning of becoming who you were always meant to be. You see, the final, eternal truth about being a chosen one without loved ones is this: greater than it strips you down until all that's left is your soul. And from that soul, the world will be changed. You didn't survive just for your own sake. Your tears, they're medicine for someone else. Your story, it's a lantern for another chosen one walking through their dark night. Your resilience, it's permission for someone else to rise. You were never meant to hoard this journey. You were meant to become a bridge, a voice, a presence that reminds others you're not alone. I've been there too, and you will make it through. So now, dear chosen one, shattered and yet, here you are, still breathing, still rising, still glowing, even with a cracked heart. So what now? Do you keep hiding? Do you keep pretending you're fine when your soul is aching for connection? Do you bury the wisdom you've gained just to avoid standing out again? Or do you accept the eternal truth of your path? Do you finally stand in it fully, not halfway, not apologetically, but boldly, because someone out there is waiting for your light? They're not looking for perfection. They're looking for real. They're looking for someone who knows what it feels like to be abandoned and still chooses love. Someone who's been crushed by silence and still speaks with gentleness. Someone who has walked alone for so long and still keeps a candle lit for others. That someone is you. And the only way forward now is through the veil. Past the hurt, past the memories, past the illusions of what could have been, because what's coming for you, it's divine, it's prepared, it's your eternal portion. But you'll only recognize it if you stop clinging to what you've outgrown. So here's your call to action, and it's not easy, but it's holy, greater than let go. Let go of the need to be understood. Let go of the fantasy that they'll come back and finally get you. Let go of the guilt that says you should have stayed smaller to be loved. You weren't born to be tolerated. You were born to be revered. And if it means being alone a little longer, so be it. The ones meant for you, your soul family, will find you at your highest vibration. but only if you stay the course, only if you keep walking, even with tear-filled eyes, only if you trust that this eternal loneliness is not a void, but a sacred preparation. So walk on, chosen one. Walk with your head high. Walk with your scars visible. Walk with the quiet confidence of someone who has been carved by God. You are not broken. You are not forgotten. You are not too much. You are the answer to someone's silent prayer. Let your life prove that solitude was never a sentence. It was a sanctuary, and now that the fire has refined you, it's time to rise. To the chosen one, still reading this with a heavy but beating heart, this part is for you. If you felt seen in these words, if your silence was echoed here, if you whispered, "Yes, that's me," at any point, then you already know this message wasn't random. It was divinely timed. It was for you. And now that the truth has found you, what are you going to do with it? Will you shrink back into the lonely spaces that tried to convince you you were unlovable? Or will you rise as the soul you were always meant to become? Share this with another chosen one, someone who's hurting, someone who's isolated, someone who doesn't yet know their pain has a purpose. Journal one sacred truth that spoke to your soul today, and revisit it when the night feels too long. And if you're ready to step into your next level, to find others like you, to stop walking this road alone, then subscribe to this journey. Stay connected, because this isn't the end. It's only the beginning. You've been chosen, not to suffer, but to lead. And the world needs your voice now more than ever. So don't just read this and move on. Rise, reclaim, remember who you are, because you're not just walking toward purpose. You are the purpose.